Namaskar. To commemorate the 32nd anniversary of January 19th, 1990, the pinnacle of the 7th mass exodus of Kashmiri Pandits from Kashmir, the KOA Youth Board has put together this video. We discuss the history of the Kashmiri Pandit community, the 7 genocides and exoduses that we have faced, and how it has and continues to impact our community today. Through this video, we reflect on the centuries of pain that we have suffered, and we hope that this video serves as a testament to the strength of our community.
To begin, Kashmir was named after Kashyap, a Vedic sage. Jalodbhava, a demon, had been blessed with immortality by Lord Brahma on the condition that he stayed in the Satisar lake. His demonic activities and behavior tormented both the Nagas and the humans who lived in the valley. So Kashyap and his son approached Lord Vishnu for his help. Lord Vishnu emptied the lake and consequently destroyed Jalodbhava, but now the lake was entirely drained. So Kashyap approached the goddesses Parvati, Lakshmi, and Saraswati and asked them to flow down and replenish the valley. Goddess Parvati took form as Vitasta or Jhelum, Goddess Lakshmi became the Vaishya river, and Goddess Saraswati came down as the Rumbiera river. This replenished the entire valley, and it was named Kashmir, meaning Kashyap's lake, after Kashyap. Kashmiri Pandits are the indigenous people of Kashmir, the northernmost region in India. The people of Kashmir lived a dharmic lifestyle, and Hinduism and Buddhism, along with Shaivism, were practiced by many. The Kashmir Valley quickly became a center for knowledge and spirituality. Kashmiri Pandits have experienced 7 ethnic cleansings and have been forced to flee their homes and land 7 times. Let's take a look at the 7 exoduses and how it all led up to the events that transpired on January 19th, 1990.
The first genocide Kashmiri Pandits faced happened under Saeed Mir Ali Hamdani and Sultan Sikandar from 1389 to 1413. Roughly 700 Saidis, along with Hamdani, moved to Kashmir and executed their agenda of creating a divide between the Hindus and Muslims who peacefully coexisted. Hamdani tortured Kashmiri Pandits and gave them an ultimatum to convert to Islam or to leave or to be killed. He desecrated many Hindu temples and forced roughly 37,000 Kashmiri Pandits to convert to Islam. Sikandar also committed atrocious acts against the Pandits, such as standing on Hindu deities, beheading Pandits, and burning religious and holy books. 7 mounds, each about 500 pounds, of sacred threads worn by Kashmiri Pandits were thrown into the Dal Lake. These numbers are astounding when you realize that each thread is only 3 grams. His acts raised the number of Kashmiri Pandits' deaths to 100,000. Under Sikandar's rule, Kashmiri Pandits were drowned, burned alive, left on the streets to die from hunger, dehydration, and sickness, and faced many other unimaginable scenarios. Due to all these acts of violence against them by radicalized Islamists, Kashmiri Pandits fled for the first time to neighboring areas.
The second exodus occurred in the 1500s and was perpetrated by a group called the Chucks. They practiced the Shia sect of Islam. Ghazi Chuk was appointed prime minister under Sultan Muhammad Shah. Under Ghazi Chuk, very anti-Hindu violent policies were enacted. Ghazi Chuk encouraged mobs to loot the homes of Kashmiri Pandits, take over their properties, as well as destroy and desecrate Hindu temples in Kashmir. Under Ghazi Chuk, 900 Kashmiri Pandits were beheaded daily for choosing not to convert to Islam. He also greenlighted a policy that allowed the slaughtering of 1,000 cows daily to send a message to Kashmiri Pandits that if they chose not to convert to Islam, they would share the same fate as those cows. Once again, Kashmiri Pandits were forced to flee their homeland.
The third wave of ethnic cleansing happened from 1585 to 1783 under the rule of the Mughals. For a brief period, Kashmiri Pandits received a reprieve from the violence under the rule of Akbar as he tried to roll back the pain inflicted on the Pandits under the Chuk rule. The rule of Aurangzeb demolished any progress made. When he took the throne in 1658, his interests laid in Islamizing the entirety of the Indian subcontinent, specifically through the use of violence. He encouraged the destruction of Hindu temples, imposed strict Islamic laws on everyone, and placed jizya on non-Muslims. He also placed those who agreed with his cruel plans in positions of power, such as Iftikhar Khan, who also forced many to convert, leave, or be killed. They were also forbidden from wearing tilak and the sacred thread, and the women faced sexual violence and were kidnapped. Many Kashmiri Pandits fled and sought refuge in an area that became known as Bazar Sitaram. The Kashmiri Pandits, led by Pandit Kriparam, approached Tegh Bahadur, the 8th Sikh Guru, with their pleas of aid against the oppression they were facing. Guru Tegh Bahadur bravely confronted the Mughals ruling Kashmir, but was promptly thrown in jail for 4 months. He was told by Aurangzeb he would only be released if he converted to Islam and left Sikhism behind. But Guru Tegh Bahadur, true to his promise to the Kashmiri Pandits, did not accept this, and he, along with 3 of his followers, were put through intense torture. His 3 followers were hacked to pieces, boiled, and burned alive. Guru Tegh Bahadur, after being made to watch the torture of his followers, was beheaded by Jalaluddin Jalad in Chandni Chowk on November 24th, 1675.
Following the rule of the Mughals, Kashmir saw the rule of the Afghans. Kashmiri Pandits continued to face physical torture, extreme taxation, sexual violence, forced conversions, and desecration of holy places, to name a few. Kashmiri Pandits were also captured and shipped to Afghanistan to be kept and used as slaves. In comparison to this, the faith of being murdered for this residing in Kashmir seemed meek. Those in political power continued their slaughter through vicious means. For example, Chief Minister Fazl Kant beheaded Kailash Dar, and Governor Mir Hazar used leather bags to drown Pandits. Additionally, any public acts of practicing Hinduism, such as wearing tilak, was banned, and men were forced to grow beards to assimilate with the Muslims. Under their 67-year rule, Kashmiri Pandits fled from Kashmir 4 different times, and they made these journeys to places like Delhi on foot. The Kashmiri Pandits once again approached the Sikhs, specifically Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And once Kashmir was captured by the Sikhs, Kashmiri Pandits once again saw a reprieve in violence against them.
The 5th genocide and exodus took place under the ruler of Sheikh Abdullah. He was a prominent activist in the Muslim Reading Room Party, which later became known as a national conference. Prior to his taking power, many Kashmiris have traveled to Srinagar to see the trial of Abdullah Qadir. And during this, the Dogra ruler opened fire on the crowd, resulting in 22 fatalities. Many Kashmiris started protesting the Dogra rule, but these protests became anti-Hindu and resulted in violence against them. These events led up to August 1947, during which Pakistani men, with support of Pakistani army, crossed the border into Kashmir with the purpose of looting, destroying Kashmiri Pandit homes and businesses. This led to thousands and thousands of Kashmiri Pandits fleeing and finding refuge in neighboring regions. In 1950, Sheikh Abdullah passed the J&K Estate Abolition Act, in which land more than a certain threshold was seized from landlords and given to sharecroppers and landless laborers, but without compensation to the landlords. This policy disproportionately hurt Kashmiri Pandits in the valley, and it became accepted that this was a targeted attack against the Hindus in the region.
The 6th exodus of Kashmiri Pandits took place post-independence, but even though they were no longer under British rule, Kashmiri Pandits continued to suffer. After the independence of India and Pakistan, those in power leveraged for Kashmir to become an Islamic republic. The turbulent atmosphere of Kashmir worsened once Gul Shah grabbed power from Farooq Abdullah and became the chief minister. Under his power, a curfew was instated and Kashmir was essentially put under lockdown for months at a time. Gul Shah constantly incited Kashmiri Muslims to attack Kashmiri Pandits in an effort to save Islam. This led to extensive desecration of Hindu temples, extensive violence against Hindu women, and religious violence through acts of burning cows. This anti-Hindu violence and sentiment spread throughout Kashmir, and Farooq Abdullah aided Gul Shah's mission by leading the violence in Anantnag, Salar, and Fatehpur. Due to unrestrained murder and sexual violence, many Kashmiri Pandits did not feel safe in their home and fled. Once more, the illusion of secularism in Kashmir that Sheikh Abdullah had tried to promote had effectively been shattered as all rulers, without restraint, charged ahead with their opposition of indigenous Kashmiri Pandits. Despite all these acts of violence, some Kashmiri Pandits stayed in Kashmir with the faith that their Muslim neighbors and friends, whom they had lived next to for generations, would not harm them. But this proved to not only be false, but the reality was the absolute opposite of this prediction.
All of these events culminated in the 7th genocide and exodus, during which most Kashmiri Pandit families fled Kashmir. For most, this would be the last time seeing their homeland, belongings, homes, neighbors, and last time knowing life as it was before migration. All through the 1990s, politics was being pulled from side to side constantly. The Muslim United Front, the MUF, believed that the 1978 election to the Legislative Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir had been rigged by the National Conference Congress Combine. This false narrative was portrayed in the media as an act of oppression towards the Muslim majority in Kashmir and was used to encourage an Islamist separatist movement. This was one of many political conflicts that arose. But despite only making 3% of the population by this point due to constant torture and killings and exoduses, the Kashmiri Pandits were blamed for the political conflicts. Pakistan's Inter-Service Intelligence, the ISI, and the Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, JKLF, conspired together to commit mutiny against Kashmiri Pandits, which is marked by the murder of Tikka Lal Taplu, a lawyer and the president of BJP's chapter in Kashmir. The second killing was that of Nilkant Ganju, a retired judge who was targeted due to his sentencing of Makbul Bhatt to the death penalty because he had killed a police officer. Multiple terror groups coordinated a misinformation campaign, which presented to the rest of the world news about a growing resistance movement against the so-called Indian occupation of Kashmir. ISI manipulated many Muslim youth and taught them the idea of Islamist militancy against Hindus and provided them with arms training. On January 4th, 1990, newspapers began publishing a document that demanded that all Kashmiri Pandits leave the valley. This was paired with the blasting of separatist and violent speeches from mosque speakers. These speeches called for azadi. In this case, that meant the destruction of the infidels. These speeches signaled one thing and one thing only to the Kashmiri Pandits: death is upon us. The murder and torture of Kashmiri Pandits became even more commonplace than before, and young Muslim men were constantly radicalized and trained to cross the border to quote-unquote attack India. Kashmiri women were told to identify themselves with a tilak, and it was broadcasted that Kashmiri Pandit men had to leave their women behind so they could become the property of the radicalized Muslims in the region. Slogans such as Raliv, Saliv, Ya Galiv, which means convert to Islam, leave Kashmir, or die, were constantly played from mosque speakers. Kashmiri Pandits were brutally tortured, maimed, assaulted, and sexually assaulted every day. Bodies were found nailed to trees, burned with cigarettes, floating in rivers, dismembered, shot, and hung, to name just a few of the atrocities that took place. Kashmiri Pandits, fearing for their lives, began talking about once again fleeing. Families began leaving one by one, and as these events continued, it culminated in the largest of all exoduses and one of the largest human migrations in all of history. 350,000 to 600,000 Kashmiri Pandits fled Kashmir overnight with just a sliver of their belongings. The height of this violence took place over 1989 and 1990, with only a few families remaining behind in Kashmir after 1990. Kashmir, which was once a place of knowledge, tolerance, peace, and togetherness, was unrecognizable. And for most Kashmiri Pandit families, any hope for a future return to normalcy in the valley had been effectively shattered.
This year marks 32 years of the mass exodus that took place on January 19, 1990. Through this video, we want to highlight how important it is to keep our history and the memory of our martyrs alive through conversation and dialogue. what happened to the Kashmiri Pandit community is still fresh. 32 years is nothing in the grand scheme of time. Our community's genocide and the oppression of the Kashmiri Pandit people has gone largely unrecognized by the global community. Together, through conversation, we have the power to set the narrative straight. We deserve to have our suffering, our pain, and our experiences recognized. We have a right to set our truth. We request that in remembrance of the suffering and pain our community faced, that you all keep our history alive by talking about it to non-Kashmiris who need to know our stories and the plight of our people.
On August 5th, 2019, a historic decision was made to revoke the temporary special status of Jammu and Kashmir granted under Article 370 of the Indian Constitution. As a result of the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, the people of Jammu and Kashmir will now have the same rights and privileges as the rest of India's citizens. However, much of the media has painted this repeal as unconstitutional, claiming that it violates the rights of Kashmiri citizens. This could not be further from the truth. The articles were put in place temporarily, and they were always intended to be removed. Furthermore, the abrogation of these articles has had major benefits for the region of Jammu and Kashmir. Under Article 35A, a Kashmiri man could marry anyone outside Kashmir and still retain the rights to his parents' land and property. However, under this same article, if a Kashmiri woman married an Indian not residing in Kashmir, she lost all rights to land and property. Therefore, if a Kashmiri woman wanted to retain rights to ancestral property, she was limited in her options for marriage. The removal of Article 35A eliminated this disparity and restored gender equality. Articles 370 and 35A also prevented any Indian or foreign entity from owning property in the state. This provision essentially stopped all outside investment in the state and hindered the potential of a very booming economy. With industries such as tourism, this could have meant business growth and employment opportunities for the people of Kashmir. These possibilities were previously denied to Kashmiris, but are now available due to the abrogation of Article 370.
The events that transpired during the 1990s, along with all 7 genocides and exoduses, continues to impact our community and the lives of Kashmiri Pandits all over the world. Even today, we see Kashmiri Pandits experiencing religious and ethnic persecution in Kashmir. Kashmiri Pandits, as well as other minorities in Kashmir, continue to be targeted today. On June 8, 2021, a Kashmiri Pandit, Sarpanch Ajay Pandita, was shot dead by terrorists. A little over a year later, another killing rocked the community. 70-year-old pharmacist Makhan Lal Bindru was killed by terrorists right in front of his shop. And soon after, a Sikh school principal, Supinder Kaur, and Deepak Chand, a Kashmiri Pandit teacher, were also shot to death on the premises of a school on the outskirts of Srinagar. When will it stop?
Our community has seen a variety of horrors and gone through what some might call unimaginable experiences, but many have lived the reality of ethnic cleansing and genocide. As mentioned earlier, this year is the 32nd anniversary of the mass exodus of Jan 19th, one of the largest exoduses throughout human history. On this day and every other day throughout the year, we ask for you to talk about our history, talk to your family, to your friends, to your colleagues, and most importantly, to your kids. It is imperative that we keep our history alive and work hard to set the narrative straight any chance we get. To relive those memories and that pain is hard. It is hard to talk about the loss of our family members and our friends and our neighbors, of those never seen again after migration. But if we do not talk about it, the history of what happened to our community will get buried. If we do not talk about it, the atrocities that Kashmiri Pandits faced and the 7 genocides that we experienced will be forgotten forever. Communication is a powerful, powerful tool, and it is important that we tell those around us and the world the reality of the lived experiences of Kashmiri Pandits.
In order to accomplish this goal of setting the narrative straight of what happened to Kashmiri Pandits in Kashmir, the youth have launched an initiative called Humans of Paradise on Earth, also known as the Hope Collective. Humans of Paradise on Earth is a project run by Kashmiri Pandit youth that aims to tell the stories of Kashmiri Pandits, their childhoods, their accounts of terrorism and genocide, and their lives today. We want to document the joys, the sorrows, and everything in between. While our account is known as Humans of Paradise and Earth and can be found on both Instagram and Facebook, we have named the project the Hope Collective. HOPE is not only an acronym for Humans of Paradise on Earth, but also symbolizes the hope that the Kashmiri Pandit community holds for recognition and reparations. Kashmiri Pandit voices have been silenced for so long, and our history has been constantly overlooked. Our voices and stories have been ignored, and we have been denied platforms on which we can speak out about our 7 exoduses and the ongoing religious persecution of our people. Through HOPE, we are forging our own safe space and platform where we can talk about our stories. We will be posting on a regular basis and highlighting a diverse range of experiences. We recognize that there have been various injustices all over the world, including Kashmir. We recognize that those struggles are also important, but we believe that there has to be a space for just Kashmiri Pandit voices that should not be co-opted by other groups, as our community and its oppression have been actively ignored, neglected, and brushed aside. We want to create a space for solely Kashmiri Pandits where they have the safety of not being disregarded. Our account serves to catalog our stories and provide them a place of permanent residence. We hope to empower the global Kashmiri Pandit community and proliferate information about the Kashmiri Pandit community and our multiple genocides and exoduses to the rest of the world. We have great hope that our account will preserve our history and culture while also being an educational resource. We want to encourage all Kashmiri Pandit adults who have experienced the events that transpired in Kashmir and its impacts to sign up to be interviewed and to have your story published on our pages, no matter where in the world you are located. The link to sign up to be interviewed can be found on the KOA Youth website and has been posted within the KOA Facebook groups. Additionally, it has also been sent out in the KOA newsletter and can be found in your email inbox. We are extremely thankful and grateful for your support as we undertake this project. Overall, we hope that this video was not only educational regarding our history, but it has encouraged all of you to continue talking about the events that transpired in 1990 and also throughout history.